Greetings, YouTube. I can't remember the first time in my life I got a comic book. I was very young, and some of the comic books in my collection are from the 50s and 60s, so I think I inherited those from my father. But comics have pretty much always been a part of my life. We used to have a little diner in the near the post office that I'd walk to and buy comic books because they had a rack for them, and at the time that was pretty much the only place I could get comic books. Bookstores didn't carry them. There were no comic stores in the area that I was aware of outside of a big city like Boston. And at the time, they were mostly into selling old backstock. People who were collectors and things like that. The idea of the comic store as a location where you bought new comics hadn't really been introduced yet. It wasn't something that really hit until the 80s, at least where I lived. And I can remember when the first comic store opened in my city, and it was a little completely separate building that was near a movie theater, between the movie theater and the mall. So I would just happen to be going by one day, walking from one to the other, and it was a big sign outside saying opening on so and so days, and it was like 2 or 3 days before the opening day. But the door was open because it was warm, and they were loading things in and out. And I just walked in and said hello. So I was actually a customer of theirs before the store opened, and it was known as the Comic Store. And the Comic Store was in Manchester for a long time. Eventually, they opened up 2 more stores in another city, and eventually they closed the stores in my city, and they still have 1 store left in Nashua, New Hampshire. Occasionally, times that I need comics now, I go to the store that's known as Double Midnight. They sell full line of comics, plus they have some gaming space for people who are into card games mostly. But I've always loved comics. When I was in the 80s and 90s, and I was single and had a lot of disposable income, I would dump a lot of money into comic books. Literally, I could dump $40 to $50 a week. And that was back in the 80s when comics weren't as expensive as they are now. Now comic books are running in the $3 to $4 range a piece. And this is back when they were still under $1 or around $1. So that's a lot of comic books. And I would read them voraciously. Now, I probably buy 3 or 4 comic books a year. Sometimes I'll buy them used, from the bargain bins. I happen to really love the concept of the trade paperback because it's just so convenient to get an entire 6 or 10 issue run in one volume. I find it very handy, and it's easier and often cheaper than buying them one at a time. I don't have to keep going back to the store. In fact, the only series that my wife and I are following at the moment is a retelling of The Wizard of Oz, which she's been reading, and I think it's 8 issues. I think she's on number 6. So 2 more issues and we're done. It's like $3, I think, so it's an affordable luxury even with the economy being what it is. At the moment, I'm in the process of trying to get rid of my comic collection. I have about 16 boxes of comics, and a box holds around 300 comics, so that's a lot of comics. I'm keeping less than a box. So far, I think I've got a stack. If I were to pull all the trade paperbacks off my shelf and such, it's probably about 200 comic books. And those are the ones I'm going to keep. In fact, Friday I'm going to go get myself one of those fancy boxes that has a drawer that pulls out instead of top loading, because I think it'll be more convenient. And I think it's also better quality. But I'm giving the local comic shop the chance to buy them. And I don't think they're really interested, because my taste in the 80s and 90s, when I had money and had access to a comic store, ran to a lot of independent, obscure titles. I read a lot of things that, in retrospect, are crap. And I spent last week taking pictures of all these comic books. I wanted a record of my collection. I also wanted to be able to hand a CD to someone and say, this is what I got, what do you want? Because it was a whole lot easier than sitting at a computer and transcribing them from the comic title through the keyboard onto my computer. Frankly, I hate to transcribe text, and I wasn't ever going to get that project done. As it was, it took me 5 days of taking pictures. 3 to 4 boxes of comics a day. It wasn't exciting. It was pick a comic from a pile, put it on a stand, click the button on the camera, take the comic off the stand, put it away, grab the next comic book again and again and again, literally thousands of times. But the project's finished. I've got all the comic pictures I want done. I've got some of the CDs I already burned and gave them to the guy who owns the comic store, and I have no idea if he's interested or not. My father tells me he knows someone who deals with eBay. If I can't get rid of him at the comic store, I may just take him to that guy. He wants a 30% cut. That's fine with me. And if I can't, even if he's not interested, I know a guy at work who I think I can just give them to and tell him if he ever makes any profit off it, I'll take half. And I'm not really caring at this point. I just want them out of my house. They're just a huge waste of space. I haven't looked at most of them in decades, and I have absolutely no memory of even buying some of these comics. I mean, I never knew I read so much Iron Man and Green Lantern. No memory at all of reading these titles. But I still love the medium of comics. I love good art. My friend Scott Wegner is the artist of Atomic Robo, and he's very talented, and I enjoy having that connection to the comics industry. I read comic book blogs on a regular basis, and I like a lot of the images that they come up with. But frankly, it's nothing but soap operas for guys in silly tights who like to punch things. So my interest in comics is a whole lot smaller, but I still have a great fondness in my heart for all those years I spent curled up on a sofa reading my comic books.